Hello and welcome to the podcast from the Huffines Institute for Sports Medicine and Human Performance. I'm your host, Tim Lightfoot, and I'm so pleased that you were able to join us today in this new era. We try to do something a little bit different every 50 or so episodes, and today you're seeing our first foray into video podcasting. We're flipping everything from straight audio to video, and for those of you that like the audio version, you'll still be able to get those on our website, so just tune in and get that from us. But we certainly want to we want to welcome you all into our new video production. And we're so excited to be here because we're actually using the studios of one of our colleagues and collaborators for many years, TexAgs Radio. And we're so pleased today to have our first video podcast guest be one of their main stars, Gabe Bock, who is the voice of TexAgs Radio, and many people have heard him many times. And so, Gabe, welcome to the podcast.
This is really exciting, Tim. It really is. My mother doesn't even call me a star, so be careful there a little bit. And I don't want my wife to listen to this, and then she'll bring me down a couple of levels. But hey, at the same time, this is really fun. It's exciting. We've got the studio. We're thinking about ways to really expand the studio and come up with different sets. And really utilize this space as well as we can. You know, we're on the show from 8 to 11 a.m., and then we're thinking, okay, what else do we do? We started doing the Lucci cast with Billy Lucci, Trevor Knight. We're going to expand that some. Justin Dunning uses this space to do a player-to-player podcast, which is really cool, and right up your alley, too, because we're talking about elite athletes talking to elite athletes, which is really fun. And then, okay, who else could benefit from this? Certainly people on campus, certainly local businesses, and we're able to use our space right across the street, our locale, our location to Texas A&M, to utilize this space as good as we possibly can. And I love that you guys have jumped on board with this thing. It's going to be exciting.
Thanks, Gabe. You know, and we've been trying to get Gabe on our podcast for many years.
I was waiting until you had video.
Yeah, well, he was waiting because we all have a face for video. Isn't that right, Gabe?
Right.
We had to wait for the medium to catch up with us.
Yeah,
right?
Olin likes to say that he has a face for radio and a voice for rodeo.
There you go.
So I think I've got a face for rodeo for sure.
So in our podcast, and regular listeners and now watchers will know that we always try to bring in people who have an interesting take on sports medicine, human performance, and health, and a variety of other things.
Big-time athletes, too.
And you can tell he's a big-time athlete. And that's why we want Gabe on here. And so what we normally do is we're going to give a little introduction. I'm going to tell people why it's important that we have you on today.
Great. I want to know.
And then we're going to just jump into a kind of a regular conversation.
Perfect.
And so as we've already indicated, many of you may know that Gabe is kind of the voice of TexAgs Radio. You'll hear him quite a bit, but it's not as if he just rolled into town one day and fell off the turnip truck and they said, we want to make you the star of the show.
Almost,
but close, yeah. And in fact, actually, Gabe graduated, has a degree in journalism from Texas A&M University. Class of 2003, it was the last journalism class, actually, from A&M.
I killed the program,
yeah,
in fact.
Gabe killed the program.
They brought it back. It took a while
after
the Gabe Bock era, but they have brought it back, and they're doing a great job of it.
We certainly need more journalists now. So,
yes.
But anyway, so you were the last of that class, and after that, he started working with one of the local TV stations, KBTX, TV3. He was a reporter-producer with Bryan Broadcasting. Many of you in the area know Bryan Broadcasting. He did work with WTAW. In 2006, we found out that that Gabe actually placed second in the Texas AP Broadcaster Contest for his work on the Billy Gillespie Daily Show and the Coach Fran Daily Shows as well.
Yep.
Congratulations. I'm not sure many people know that.
Way back in the day, I had forgotten that, so I appreciate the reminder.
Yeah, that's a big shout-out to producer Carlos for finding that one. In talking about the sacrifices that people have to make when they're trying to make a name for themselves, Gabe was also a part-time host at KGOW in Houston and drove back and forth from Bryan College Station to Houston to make that happen. Been here with TexAgs since 2008 and really has overseen and grown the radio and now video presence of TexAgs. And so, like I said, we've been working with Gabe and TexAgs for several years, and we wanted to sit down and chat with Gabe about what it's like to be in the sports media business. And I think let's start with that.
Yeah.
Did you grow up wanting to be in sports media?
Absolutely.
From day one?
You know, my mother owns a beauty salon. So her mother was in the fingernail, hair kind of business. My mother grew up wanting to always do something that she loved, where she didn't feel like she had to work every day. Her brother was quite a bit older than her, and he was, he started out doing railroad stuff and hated it, and he got into the cutting horse industry. And that's something that was a passion of his. And he made a lot of money and was highly successful. He was doing cutting horses, partnering with Tom Brokaw and Joe Montana. He's still doing a lot of that stuff. And he's kind of semi-retired, but he's doing that. And I learned from them. And then my dad cut his teeth as a mechanic, working for his dad, an American badass, working in Vietnam, reconnaissance, Marine Corps. I didn't get in any of the tough guy genes. All right, when I go to Thanksgiving and Christmas at my house on my dad's side, I'm the little reporter guy. All right, and these guys are all in the military and they're all American heroes.
Yeah.
And my dad started. He wanted to get away from working for his father. He started working for the railroad and did that for about 35 years. Hated every day of it, but it paid well. Sure. So I learned from my dad a little bit of what not to do. And then I learned from my mother and her side of the family of do something you love and it'll never feel like work. And if you can make some money out of it, because you got to support your family, if you can find that sweet spot of doing both, now you got something. Yeah. And so that's what I learned. Now, growing up, everybody's got the dream of, being a player.
Did you play a sport?
Yeah, I played baseball, football, basketball. Growing up, thinking I was going to make it as a player, but pretty quickly I realized I'd run out of ability. And I played 2 years of varsity baseball, but I even knew at that time that my dream of playing a sport was long past. I mean, I knew that. So then I came to A&M with the idea of either coaching or being a journalist. But growing up, always watching, Granddad and I watched every Rangers game. I'd go to his house. We'd watch every Cowboys game, the Mavericks. Grew up, I didn't necessarily root for A&M as a kid because I'm a first-generation Aggie. Right. It was a visit here that really opened my eyes to just the greatness of A&M and what they're all about and how unique and special this place is. But was a fan of college sports. But growing up, just a huge fan of sports, and I knew from a very early age that I needed to be in sports. If I was going to do something that was a passion of mine, and I'm a musician too, and that was a big dream of mine too at one point, but you really can't do both because you got to go – we're talking about polar opposite type of career paths, and it's hard to really mesh both and do both of them well. So I chose sports. Right. And it's something that I've always known ever since a kid that I was going to be involved in it in some fashion. I was always interested in the broadcast side of things and listening to play-by-play guys and listening to Mark Holtz and Eric Nadell on the radio call a Rangers game or Brad Sham or listening. Granddad and I would turn the radio on over breakfast and listen to Randy Galloway and his talk show and just how much fun these guys had talking about sports but making it fun and entertaining. Sure. And then that was when I was a kid where the proliferation of the internet, that hadn't happened yet. Right. The opportunities were way more limited.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Back when we were growing up, I think of sports media as Sports Illustrated. Right. And maybe the radio broadcast that you're talking about. And that was kind of it. You had the sports guy on the local TV show, but that was like a 5-minute segment.
And there really weren't all sports stations.
Right, exactly.
Back then.
Yeah.
So even growing up, I didn't – and I was into the writing side of things too, and we read the newspaper every day and everything else, but I was more passionate about the talking side of it. I was more passionate about the opportunity to sit in a room or at a ball field and paint the picture of what I was seeing. Right. And do that in studio or the ball field, either one of those, very passionate about that. So my ultimate goal was to be the play-by-play voice of the Texas Rangers. That has been a dream of mine for a long time. But then your dreams change a little bit, right? Sure. When you get married and you figure some stuff out and you realize now my dream is to be home with my kids every night, right? Do a great job and do my job and do it as well. So then it became less about the path that it takes to go do that is crazy. Right. I mean, you're spending 3 summers in Clinton, Iowa in the middle of nowhere, right? For $15,000 a year if you're lucky. Right. So, we know
about the minor league sports. We just don't realize there's minor leagues for announcers too.
Right. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So it changed. Your path changed along the way. I'm thrilled with the TexAgs opportunity. This is a dream come true to stay here. Is this a big market? Not necessarily. Is it a growing market? Yes. Is it a major market college sports team? 100%. Right. And now it couldn't be a better time to be doing what we're doing right now in Texas.
Well, with the technology changes especially over the last 10 years in particular, you've gone from not necessarily just being a local market. This is an international market. Right. Because especially with the internet, and you guys are broadcast on the internet as well as, of course, local radio and the video as well. So, I mean, you have an international reach as well because you will often have callers or people that text you in from all over the place.
Oh, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
You know, Dalton's producing this segment for us right now, the publisher or the producer, and we'll look at text messages during the show, and they'll come from all over. We got a guy who texts in. He's a driller off the coast of Egypt, and he texts in. You know, we got JP in Guatemala that texts into the show. Madden in Chicago. So that's because of the internet.
Right.
You know, it used to be if you're not in range, you're not getting it.
That's right.
And you're never getting it after the show, so you have to tune in live, and you got to be in range, AM, FM.
Right.
So what we tried to do with the show, and we started August 22nd, 2011, and it was a 2-hour AM-only show that was also streamed on TexAgs.com and podcasted. Mm-hmm. But as it's grown, it's now a 3-hour show. We've been able to we're trying to meet people wherever they are. Mm-hmm. So it's on AM. It's also now on FM, and it's also on local television, and it's also through all kinds of major podcast players, and then, of course, on the website. So but because of the internet, Aggies are all over. Right. I mean, last I checked, there are like 430,000 living Aggies.
Wow. That's a big audience, potential audience.
They're all over.
Yeah.
And a ton of them are right here local, and it is a local show, and we want to stay true to that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Aggies are all over the place, and we want to meet them where they are, because whether you're living in Bryan College Station and you can go down the street and go to A&M games, or whether you hadn't been back in 10 years, you still love A&M if you win here.
Right.
People love A&M. They're all over the world, and we're just trying to reach out and touch them every single morning. And it's very important to connect with those guys, because it allows them to feel a little taste of Aggie land and a little bit closer to home.
Sure.
So,
how do you maintain your enthusiasm for sports? Because you're around it so much, and you know the backstories, you know the things that are going on behind the scenes, even if you can't talk about them. And so it's I'm sure it saturates your well-being. And most people, sports are entertainment for them. It's a release from what they normally do. So how do you maintain your enthusiasm? Are you still a fan, or do you look at it just as work?
Absolutely. I've forgotten how to cheer at games. So if I go as a fan and something great happens, you get a little bit desensitized to it, because you're in the media and you learn very quickly in the press box decorum and everything not to do that.
Yeah. Oh, so you mean you guys don't jump up and down and scream in the press box?
Alan Cannon, the sports information director at A&M, threw his mother out of the press box one time.
Wow.
He kicked his mom out of the press room one time for cheering, because she doesn't come up very often. He invited her up.
Yeah.
She cheers on a touchdown, boots her.
Wow.
Okay. He booted the play clock operator one time.
Really?
He finally let him go back. But he's like, that's your one chance. Because that guy started cheering. He's a fan too. He's a local guy. Sure. He's a play clock operator. Yeah. But that's pretty big. That's a pretty big job. You don't just throw another rider back there and say you're running the play clock.
Right.
He really couldn't kick the dude out. Right. And the guy's named Barney. He was 90 years old at the time, still running the play clock every Saturday at Kyle Field.
Wow.
He's like, you got one more chance.
Well,
so you just learn it's a professional environment.
Yeah.
So when I go and take the kids and they're jumping up and down on a home run or whatever, I've learned to kind of celebrate in my own mind, in my mind.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm very subtle about that. Right. Subdued in a lot of ways watching sports.
Yeah.
You won't see me jumping up and down in my living room and barking at the TV like I used to.
Right.
So the outward expression of my fandom is a lot different, but I'm a huge fan of sports. A lot of times I have noticed just in social settings, people try to talk about something besides sports and almost apologize when the conversation steers to sports. But I want the conversation to steer to sports. And that's why I like Jimbo so much, because I don't think he's interested in talking about anything except football.
Are you talking about our new coach, our relatively new coach?
Jimbo Fisher.
Right.
Yeah. So we've asked players, so what do you guys talk about when you just kind of get together and go to his office? Football. Like, I don't know his birthday. I don't know anything about him. We talk football 24/7. That's all he wants to talk about. And so that's kind of my deal.
Yeah.
Don't apologize for talking sports with me, because that's what I want to do. And, I check every Rangers box score in spring training.
Wow.
And even when the Mavericks are struggling, I'm checking it every morning before I get up. It's just a passion of mine, something I've always been into. It's never waned. For this show, the opportunity to communicate to Aggies every day, to work in an environment like this where, as you know, I mean, you could go shoeless and bring your dog to this place. It's like Google.
Yeah, no one knows what I'm wearing underneath the desk.
If anything,
no.
there's a no. We have one rule. I've only seen one full staff email sent by Brandon Jones ever. Like one mandate from the boss, and that was a no tank policy, because we had this guy walk in with a tank top one day, and Brandon emailed and said, there will be no tanks henceforth at TexAgs in the office. That's our only rule. It's a pretty great place to work with really good people, almost 100% A&M graduates or current students. I love the young people side of this thing. I love seeing people come from our program and get opportunities.
Well, and I was going to say, that's one of the other great things that I don't think people talk about is the opportunities you've given other people. I mean, the one I know about is Casey Smith, I believe, who's on ESPN now.
She left us for Fox Sports and then went to ESPN just several months later.
Yeah.
Is currently with Barstool.
And she was an intern.
She lives
with
in New
you
York
guys,
City.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And she was a part-time employee with us.
So this is a great learning ground for people that are up and coming.
Yeah, we had a young guy, Cav Nuzzi, that wanted to play golf at A&M, but he happened to come right after they won the championship. Well, everyone in the country wanted to be here when they won the championship. So he was the best golfer on campus that wasn't on the team. And, in fact, he was on the club team, and I think they won the national championship or finished runner-up. Well, Cav was a manager with the golf team. We learned about him and his passion for wanting to get in media and be a golf writer. Well, Cav spent about 2 years with us in our program, left us immediately for the Golf Channel, where he still works. Wow. So he works for the Golf Channel. He's doing an amazing job. He lives in Orlando. So that's fun for me. And I would say I give people opportunities. We just open the door to people. And before the journalism department came back, a lot of times we felt this obligation that we're sort of a journalism school in a lot of ways. Let's train a small handful of people as well as we can. It's up to them. They're going to get out of this thing what they put into it. But a huge passion of mine is just opening up the door to opportunities to communicate and, I guess, train up in a lot of ways.
Sure.
But for all of us, I mean, Dalton does as much training as I do. We have Olin, who is an award-winning columnist and Heisman Trophy voter, who's our main columnist and writer. And anytime anybody who's writing has any need for suggestion or anything like that, Olin is happy to work with them. So that's just a fun side of it, to see the young people come through here and cycle through.
Well, that educational aspect, though, and I know some people don't like to use that term educational, but that's really what it is. And you know, because I met with Brandon, who you mentioned earlier. Brandon's one of the co-owners of
Brandon Jones,
TexAgs,
CEO.
And we met with him in 2010 about Huffines Institute and what we could do, kind of joint ventures. And here we are 9 years later doing this kind of stuff as well as some other stuff.
We've been partnered for a while.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things I've always been impressed with is y'all are not just about sports. You're also about health. And I guess I'd like for you to talk to our audience a little bit about how you see your obligation to help people become healthy through what you can do with TexAgs, because we always bring on our speakers for our big events here that you interview on the air, and we talk about those kinds of things. So and we do a weekly Human Performance Minute with you guys. So how do you guys see that outreach aspect of your business affecting more than just sports?
Yeah, it's more than just physical health.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways, a lot of it's just a form of release and entertainment, stress relief. If you can go on TexAgs and spend a couple hours, maybe a lot of people are on there a little too much for their own good, especially if their bosses are aware of how much they're really on there. But at the same time, you know, a lot of times work and everything that's going on, family, sometimes you just need a release. You need a little form of entertainment. And for Aggies, TexAgs has sort of become that. And that's important to us. Just that mental release, just being able to communicate with Aggies. And a lot of times, the community online has then morphed into a true community of people who get to know each other. And so one thing we really try to do in a lot of ways is open up the doors of this place, and then through events to bring a bunch of people online together so that we get to know each other. So Jimmy Joe Aggie 96 is some guy named Joseph, whatever, Davis. Right. I'm just bringing up out of the blue name. Right. This is not a real username, but as an example, is now all of a sudden you get to know these guys, and then you call on these guys. Many, many times we've seen examples on TexAgs where somebody has made a post on the board if they've had a death in the family or something's going on, or somebody has cancer, or J-Reg a year ago, his daughter had cancer. She passed away. It's been a really rough time, but Aggies have just flooded him with greetings and condolences and prayers and sometimes financial support. I'll give you another example too on that front is I lost my Aggie ring. We have a tailgate every single Saturday at TexAgs. So this was about 2014, I lost my Aggie ring. We were living we were in the transition. We were building our house. So for a couple months, we were living with my wife's parents who live in College Station. And somewhere along the way, I left it maybe on the bathroom counter. I had kids, maybe somebody, I don't know what happened. I've never found it.
Yeah.
It was gone. And so we're here, we're getting to know all these guys. There's a guy on the site called iParty. Well, without these events where you bring to life these users,
sure,
I never would have called on iParty. I never would have known him. But now I know him as Nick, my buddy, my friend, right? And so I was telling Nick here at a tailgate that I lost my Aggie ring, and I was asking if he had a metal detector. And that I'm just going to go look around their property. It's a real wooded area. Maybe it fell off some. I don't know.
Right.
Just, does anybody have a metal detector? Because I was kind of freaking out, right?
Yeah.
We know how much the Aggie ring means to all of us.
Yes. For those of you that are watching that don't know what the Aggie ring means, talk to some of us.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's
everything.
It's a symbol. It's a symbol of just what it truly means to be an Aggie, how connected we are as Aggies. And I mean, I wear it proudly. Well, why do I have one right now? Because of Nick, who got together through personal messaging and secretive with some other members of the board, and they raised money and bought me a new one.
Cool.
And so then, I mean, that was just amazing. That was one of the great moments of, that's what kind of the power of TexAgs in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So then when we had this yell leader, which is kind of like, we have we don't have cheerleaders at A&M. We got these yell leaders for those that aren't connected to A&M listening, but and there's 5 of them. And one of them, his name was Shaquille Gold, and he's eating at A&M. Went to the bowl game in Memphis, and he's eating at Gus's Fried Chicken, and he sets his ring down, forgets it, comes back, it's gone.
Wow.
We find out about it. Well, we secretly raise money to get Shaq a replacement ring. It's kind of like a pay it forward thing.
Sure. Yeah.
It all happened on TexAgs without him knowing it. So there's just and creates a lot of good cheer in a lot of ways, mental health in that regard. And then just what we're doing with you guys too, of try to educate our listeners about, we cover and we celebrate these athletes.
Right.
But what really goes into it, and also how can you yourself,
how can it apply,
grow in terms of your physical health as well.
Right.
So those human performance minutes have been huge for us. How many of those have we done now? We're like 4 years in.
140 or something.
Yeah. So every week we do the human performance minute, and every week it's something different.
Right.
That really educates us about just our own health. Most of them really, some of them are for high performance athletes,
right,
but a lot of them really trickle down and are for the common person.
That's right. Yeah.
It really is. So I think that's been a huge aspect, something that I want to keep doing for a long time.
Yeah, I want to, and again, to come back to this, it's interesting the partnerships that you have built here at TexAgs, because I will often hear spots and people on from like the George Bush Presidential Library or from the Association of Former Students. And those are, and when I tell people that we're associated with a sports radio, they can group, they can get it a little bit, but they go, why? They're about sports. And it's like, well, we're about health and they're about health. And so we do a lot of things. So it's that educational aspect of what you guys have produced is really kind of cool.
Hey, I'm trying to take your advice on all these human performance minute things. So I'm learning a lot more these days about nutrition and, clean eating, and also the importance and value of working out, and not just going on like a slow jog without your heart rate up, right? I mean, you got to get your heart rate up so that, especially if you want to burn fat, everything else. So I've tried to take some of your advice, Tim.
So, well, I appreciate that, Gabe. So we're going to start wrapping up here, and there's one question that Carlos put together for me that I think is a really good question for you, kind of end here with us, and that is, you've had a lot of experiences here in Aggieland and in your life so far. Been a lot of things. For example, one of the things we found out about, you did at what we call Midnight Yell. You were a speaker at Midnight Yell at one point, which for our listeners that don't know about Midnight Yell, that's a huge event where there's at least 30,000 students that come. It's kind of like the pep rally before the big football games. And Gabe was a speaker at one of those. If you think about it, what's been the one event that pops out that gives you the most chills?
Well, that was certainly one of the most amazing moments of my career, getting an opportunity to represent Aggies in such a way. And for those that don't understand what Midnight Yell, it's a separator between A&M and everybody else as a fan base.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanna really get into this conversation of what's the most passionate fan base out there, well, number one, even Bama students will leave in the second quarter of a blowout game against, Delaware Tech. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But not Aggies. And they're not standing up the whole time. And a lot of times they're having trouble with attendance. And so a lot of times at those games, they're getting 4,000, 5,000 students. And Saban's really upset about that.
Right.
But at Aggies, they reserve 31, 32, 33,000 seats, and they're filled.
Just for the students.
And they're standing the whole time. That's just for students.
Right.
And okay, even if it's an 11 a.m. Saturday game, they're getting together at midnight basically to practice the chants they're going to say during the game, if we want to just put this in layman's terms.
Yeah.
At midnight, okay? And they'll pack that sucker out with sometimes 30, 40, 50,000 people at midnight, even if it's before an 11 a.m. game. Yeah. And so I got the opportunity, post-renovation, the first midnight yell after the renovation of Kyle Field.
Right.
And to see it like that, and then so many people were excited to go that it was packed all three decks and throughout
to the
about
sides,
halfway the lower bowls of the sides of the end zones.
Yeah.
And to see it like that, probably we estimated 55,000 people, and I got 2 minutes.
Wow.
That was the longest 2 minutes of my life. I got to tell you that, just looking up. But it was amazing, and it happened to be a week or so after one of my best friends in the business passed away, Homer Jacobs of the 12th Man magazine.
Oh, yeah.
And so to pay homage to him, he was as excited as anybody I know for that renovation. And so to have an opportunity to honor him in that way in front of so many Aggies was a highlight of my entire career. And interesting you asked this. I actually wrote down a couple of interesting things. Some of my favorite moments covering A&M. I've been covering A&M about 15, 16 years.
Right.
And at the very top of my list, and I don't know if it'll be topped anytime soon, was the comeback in Bricktown in basketball. So A&M's down by 12 points.
Yeah.
All right. With 34 seconds left. Go on a 12-2 run in 34 seconds. It's literally never happened in basketball. They literally called it a 1 in a million game comeback.
Right.
It was a 1 in a million chance that would ever happen in basketball.
And it'll never happen again, probably.
And it may never happen for another million games.
And it was an NCAA tournament.
And it was in the second round of the NCAA tournament to get Texas A&M into the Sweet 16. And it was just such a mind-boggling. And the game wasn't that exciting. A&M was getting worked.
Right.
And for that to happen, for it to flip on a dime like that, was a jaw-dropping experience. I sat on the second row right behind the A&M bench is where our seats were. So to see it from that perspective, it's a vision that I'll never forget.
Right.
So in terms of an event covering Texas A&M, I don't know if it'll ever be topped. And I covered Johnny, and I covered the win over Bama, and I covered 74-72 in the 7-overtime game with LSU. And I took my dad on his birthday to Kyle Simon's no-hitter in 2016 at Olsen Field, where his face was on the ticket that day.
Wow.
Simon's. His face was on one ticket the whole year, and it happened to be that game where he started and threw a no-hitter with my dad in the stands on his birthday.
Wow.
So there's a lot of moments.
Sure.
I mean, a lot of moments, but that comeback in Bricktown was pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Gabe, thanks for being with us today on our
Absolutely.
first video podcast.
It's awesome.
Great way to start.
I'm excited.
Yeah, and we'd like to thank everyone that's watching and listening to us online for being part of this. This is actually our 250th total podcast.
Oh, wow.
So we've been doing this a bit. So, and regular listeners know that this is when we normally will do our podcast question of the week. And so our podcast question of the week has just been sent to me. And it says, according to Gabe's tales, what two people have been kicked out of press boxes? I have to get the whole message. What two people have been kicked out of press boxes before in the past? So be the first one to send us the correct answer to that podcast question, and you'll win one of our nifty podcast T-shirts. We'll send it to you. You send your answer to Huffines at tamu.edu. That's Huffines, Huffines at tamu.edu. And you'll win a T-shirt. And Gabe's not eligible, so
shoot.
They'll have to listen. They will have to go back and listen. So again, thanks, Gabe, for being with us today.
Thank you.
thank you all again for being with us during our first video podcast. Certainly, we want to thank the Omar Smith Endowment and the Huffines Endowment for making all this possible. Our producers today are Dalton Hughes on the sound. We've got Carlos Guevara and Blake Crawford from the Institute. And, of course, we have Dale Billings, who's our media guy as well in the college. And so, again, thank you. Be back with us in a couple of weeks, and we'll have another interesting person in the world of sports medicine and human performance. And until then, we hope you stay active and healthy.